Welcome, everyone. Got a pretty big crowd today, given the snow and all that. So, the Morgan Library and Museum is a spectacular place. If you haven't been there, it's definitely worth going. You know, given the situation with COVID right at the moment, I don't know that I would feel comfortable going in, though they do have timed entrance, and if you're masked and you got your card, you can do it. So I'm going to be doing two shows. This is going to be a lot of stuff to cover in an hour. So I'm gonna dive right in. The two shows that we're going to be covering is the Van Eyck to Mondrian 300 Years of Collecting in Dresden. This is a fabulous drawing show and a really great collection. And then I'm going to do another tradition, drawings by Black artists from the American South, and this also is a really wonderful show. So that all being said, these could not be two more different worlds coming together in this location. The Dresden collection is basically called the Kupferstick Cabinet, and it's really a depository of works on paper that's been collected for, like it says, over 300 years. This one particular piece that I'm showing on the right is a Jan van Eyck drawing, which is basically just an exquisite silver point and gold point drawing. And I'll go into a little bit more depth about what that means, but it's a very sensitive medium, and you can see how, you know, fine and nuanced the line is that's used in this technique. And the other show that I'm going to be doing is this another tradition, Black artists from the American South, where Thornton Dial, you know, Ladies Stand by Tiger, is part of his kind of cryptic, symbolic language that he developed to portray the forces at work in his life as a contemporary Black man. They're really interesting pieces, and there's this group of artists is really something to see. So here we go. I'm going to go into a little bit more depth here about what's going on with this Jan van Eyck. So we're going to start off from here. So silver point is basically, you can see the tools that I've got off here to the right. It's basically the paper is prepared with gouache or with a primer, and what silver point is actually, you see the styluses over here. It's just a piece of silver wire, the metal, silver wire or gold or whatever other wire you want to feed through the stylus, and it gives you this really fine mark. So what happens with it, though, is once you put the mark down, you can't erase it. It's not like a pencil. It's not like graphite where you can just erase it off. So silver point and gold point are normally built up very slowly. So repeated lines over and over again. And then you bear down with the pressure more and more as you want to darken in the lines, and you can see how, you know, how many lines there are in this when you look at it a close up like this. It's a lovely technique, and you can get really fine and dark hatched marks and build up that way. You can also see off to the left in the reproduction some writing, and it's hard for us to make out now, but when they enhance it in the photographic process, they're able to actually discern what it is that he's written there. And this is a preparatory drawing for a painting. And so he's describing the coloration that he wants to bring into the painting later. And here's the painting. Now, this painting is not included in this exhibit, just this drawing. But you get the idea of how he used this preparatory drawing to learn about this face and what he wanted to do with it. And, you know, there aren't a lot of these drawings around. That they have a decent collection of them, but this is the only preparatory drawing that they've got for this painting that survived anyway. And this is Jan van Eyck. This is not in the show, but I wanted you to see this because this is actually something which is in all the art history books. You see this all the time when you're reviewing early. Well, actually, it's kind of late Renaissance, northern European. So this is Lucas Cranach the elder and Lucas Cranach the younger. So it's actually a father and son, you know, passing the lineage down. And you know, they're beautifully rendered pieces. It's opaque watercolor and chalk. So both these pieces are using that technique. Okay. Now, Holbein was a German-born artist, lived most of his career in Switzerland. He was admired as a portraitist, and you know, this image is an example of one of his commissions. That this was a French nobleman, soldier, and diplomat. And so this is his preparatory drawing for that painting. Now, the drawing is the only thing that's in the show. The painting is not included. But you can see the shorthand description of the patterns in the shirt, and the, you know, the way he leaves things out, but gives you the hints of where he wants to go with the painting. Okay. And this is Matea Scrumwald, very expressive foreshortening in the figure as a witness to one of the key events of the New Testament, one of the key miracles, the Transfiguration. This figure doesn't actually appear in the painting, but it was one of the preparatory sketches for it. I'm going to keep moving. There's a small group of works from India, Middle East, and China in the collection, mostly imported to Europe through the Dutch East India Company. And this is a fabulous miniature. They have several of them in the show, and they have a couple of Chinese paintings, though I don't have reproductions of those here. Fabulous color. Okay. And this is CorrectGeo. And, you know, you can see in the drawing that he's kind of working out ideas, and you see the composition's different in the finished piece from what the drawing is like. It's an interesting dialogue that goes on. It's like, you know, this is getting to know and getting to figure out exactly where he wanted to go with the composition. Okay, and all right, let's see. Sophia Nispa Agasola was one of the most famous women artists in Renaissance Italy. She comes from a noble northern Italian family and received a a liberal education and was trained by an artist. She also actually her fame spread throughout Italy and throughout Europe. She was known as a portraitist and actually was invited to serve as lady in waiting to the Queen of Spain, and spent 10 years there and painted in the court and painted the royal family, and so her reputation was really very widespread. She lived in Madrid for those 10 years, and she married a Sicilian nobleman and returned to Italy. She lived to 90, so that's a pretty substantial age for that time. So she was known to have done a number of self-portraits. In fact, if you Google search her, you can find a bunch of these self-portraits. This drawing looks a lot like her, and they say it's a possible self-portrait, though they're not. It wasn't, anything that was written on the drawing that indicates that it's definitely her, but it looks a lot like her. So I'm going to go with it. All right. Whoop. All right. So this is a Rembrandt preparatory drawing on the right, and you can see the energy of those scribbles and the mark making, and it's a very abstract thing. I mean, he's just getting that stuff down. And on the left, I put in a de Kooning drawing from 1966, 1967. It just the energy, the mark making, the use of the page and how it's occupied is something that I wanted you to see. When I look at these Rembrandt drawings, I see that kind of gestural power that is in a lot of the abstract expressionist drawings and paintings. So I just wanted to throw that in there. And this is basically a preparatory drawing for the painting that's on the left. Of course, the painting is not included in this exhibit. The drawing is. And this is Diana and Actaeon. Actaeon is this kind of, hunter who was out in the woods and stumbled across Diana and her bevy of babes bathing, and she turns him into a stag, and his hunting dogs tear him apart as he grows his horns. So, so much for a voyeur in the woods. Uh, okay. Yeah, this fellow. Now, this is a self-portrait at 12 years old. Um, he was studying with his father, who was a well-known painter at the time, and it's really an extraordinary drawing for somebody 12 years old. For somebody who's not 12 years old, it's an extraordinary drawing. So um, this is, again, one of those things where I wish I could get to see it in person, because it really is a fine piece. Very interesting. Okay. Okay, so this is one of the Goya drawings, Monks Reading. Now, if you look at what's going on in this drawing, I mean, look at the faces on the three monks in the foreground who are looking at this book. What kind of book are they studying here? Those looks are a little bit too leery to be biblical scripture that they're looking at. And in the background, you see, kind of with her face turned away, I think that's a young woman who's kind of hiding back there behind this crowd of people. Anyway, one of the things that Goya was known for was these kind of social critiques. And so, these, what he would call capriccios, they're really kind of taking the social mores of the time and poking fun at them. He was pretty good at it too. I mean, the caricatures are really remarkable, and if you want to look at more of those, you can Google them. But this one is in that collection. It's a wonderful drawing too. On top of that, the subtlety of it and the power of it. He was a great draftsman. Okay. Friedrich, beautifully rendered. This transition between darkness and light, very evocative. From my research, I learned that he had a stroke in 1835, and basically could not paint any longer. So he took to doing these drawings in pencil and brown wash. Okay, so now we're going to move on to out of the Romantic era into the 20th century. And this wonderful Toulouse-Lautrec piece. Misha Nadelson, who is the woman that sat for it, was a collector and pianist. So he drew her at the piano, and basically she was painted by Renoir, Vuillard, Bonnard. Number of artists knew her. She was really connected and was supposed to be a fabulous musician. And now on the right, we have these kind of abstracted figures. And this is Otto Muller. He's one of the German expressionists. And you can see, these flat forms that he would articulate against the the arcade kind of Arcadian landscape. He actually served. Well, okay, I'm gonna move along. Let's see. Mondrian. So this was a project that was never completed. This was planned for the layout for this lady's home, and it never came to fruition due to finances or whatever. But this piece is a really beautiful example of Mondrian's shape relationships and his use of primary colors and gray. We've now moved up into the German Democratic Republic times, and this fellow was kind of didn't quite fit into that social realism that was the accepted art for that time in the 50s. He's more in line with Paul Klee than he is with kind of propaganda social realism, but very interesting pieces. Okay, and all right, now we're moving up. This is Eyck. Was actually, they had a drawing in the collection, but I went to these and pulled up these paintings of his later work because I thought that they made a bridge to the next work that we're going to be looking at. But his work was very graffiti-like. He developed this set of symbols that are kind of archaic, and yet, you know, he has a good deal in common with somebody like Basquiat, where these, you know, basically very expressive portraits and figurative symbols were something that he developed. So on to another tradition. So the Soul's Grown Deep Foundation, which is where these pieces were acquired, was actually created by a collector and art historian named Bill Arnett. Bill actually is credited for bringing to light a number of Black artists in the South that were really on their own course and had developed in kind of isolation from the rest of the art world. Thornton Dial is one of the more famous ones, but Arnett also discovered Arnett brought to us the Gee's Bend quilters, Thornton Dial, Purvis Young. A number of these people were people that he, you know, basically said, you know, you need to look at these people. There's something here. And so a few of the works, actually many of the works are assemblage. Um, the works that are in this show are all paintings on paper, but I'm going to show you, some of the more developed and um, ambitious pieces by Thornton Dial and Purvis Young and some of the others. Um, those pieces are basically made with found objects, fabric, paint, um, the kind of refuse of our society was kind of material that these folks were using. Anything that you could paint on, they paint on it. This piece, on masonite, well, you can see the corners are kind of nicked out. So where did he pick up this piece of masonite? Who knows? All right, I'm gonna move on. But basically, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how Thornton Dial kind of and Purvis Young especially were reflecting. They're really one or two generations removed from slavery, for crying out loud. They were subjected to the abuses of the Jim Crow South. I know Thornton Dial, he was born on a sharecropping farm, and he was born in 1928. So it was back there, and basically developed his art from having seen things that people put together in their yards and looking at those, and got interested in art through that. Let's move along a little. Okay. One of the things I wanted to show also is Nellie Mae Rowe and Faith Ringgold. Now, Nellie Mae Rowe is definitely in this category of self-taught artists, where Faith Ringgold is more in the art world. But the crossover between the insiders and the self-taught is a bit fuzzy. And I really wanted to draw that, to your attention. There's this wonderful image from one of Faith Ringgold's quilts, and the women in my art actually fly. They're totally free. And I saw this flying figure in Nellie Mae Rowe's piece and thought immediately of Faith Ringgold's, Tar Beach. So the correlation between inside and out is a little bit fuzzy for me. Okay, these are Thornton Dial. And he's a highly developed artist. These symbols, he's in major museums throughout the country, including the Metropolitan and MoMA. He's in a number of different collections, and he really developed this kind of allegory business. The tiger kind of stands for survival. It's kind of an implicit symbol for the struggle for civil rights, the idea about Black history, slavery, racial discrimination, urban and rural poverty, the industrial and environmental collapse, and the idea of kind of spiritual salvation are kind of all woven in through the work. And you can see it in Dial's work and in, I'd say, more in Purvis, but also in many of these pieces, there's a quality to them that is rubbing up against society. Okay. Mr. Dial made his work from anything ready at hand, from bits of rope to bone to scrap metal. And these are really substantial. You know, out of the darkness, the Lord gave us light. This assemblage piece could be, it would stand up next to any of the abstract expressionist painters. I look at these pieces and it's like, you know, it's pop art, but there's a sincerity to the work also. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to, you know, say about this. It's powerful, and there are these dialogues that are going on. And I'm going to push on to this piece right here. Mr. Dial shredded, reassembled Stars and Stripes. Don't matter how raggedy the flag is, it's still got to tie us together. This is a really powerful piece. I mean, I look at this thing and it's like Jasper Johns, eat your heart out. Powerful, poignant, and funny at the same time. You know, this is a big piece. It's a giant box spring that's had this flag woven back into it. Remarkably powerful. And here's the man himself in his studio in Bessemer, Alabama in 2011. And you can see, you know, this figure in this piece in the background, this kind of haunted, almost skeletal figure back here, the rags hanging off of it. Quite a remarkable piece. These guys are not verbally real articulate, or I'd recommend going to some of the interviews that were done with them. But the work is very articulate, and that is kind of where I really focused here. It's a very haunting piece. Okay. So Speller. Henry Speller was a jazz musician, and his pieces are pretty racy. And I didn't include the racier ones in this little collection that I'm showing you, but it's worth a Google search to check out more of his work. Buoyant, funny. They're very direct, you know, very simple materials, pencil, pen, crayon. Okay, and here is Luster Willis. Luster Willis. Now this piece is actually a counterprint, and what I mean by that is you take paint and put it on a plastic surface or a glass surface, whatever, and then you take that piece and put another piece over the top of it, and take the print off of that, And that's where these two pieces came from. And then he worked back into them to build them up. Quite funny. Glitter, acrylic, and glue. And here's another self-portrait, very direct. I identify with the hairdo. And it's a very strong piece. It's very, I mean, it's childlike in a certain way, but they're also, there's a maturity to the expression. And when you look at the body of his work, like these two pieces, they're very powerful. Simplified, but really strong composition. Okay, and now we're going to move on to Sister Gertrude Morgan, because I really want to get us to Purvis, and he's at the end of this talk. So Sister Gertrude was actually, she was a God-fearing lady, and had these visions and put them down. Okay, there we go. The band of angels hanging out behind the marriage. So there's all kinds of scripture that's written in through this one on the left. If you look at this thing, you can take the time and actually read some of the stuff that's behind there. But we're gonna move along. Okay, Nellie Mayrow. We're back to her. Remember, I had shown you one of her pieces in relationship to Faith Ringgold, and this is turning your home into a playhouse. And if you look at the portrait of her and you look at the stuff that's hanging out in front of her house there, you can see that she did exactly that. So her house is one big assemblage. Okay, and here's more of her work. It's almost like embroidery. It's very rich and wonderful there. It's very simple: crayon, colored pencil. That's it. Nothing fancy, but really fanciful. Okay, and now we're going to move on to Purvis Young. So I really wanted to get to him because this guy is really powerful. So he was in prison at 18 for armed robbery, and that's where he was exposed to art and started to paint. So his work is really, it contains a lot of the inequity that he saw around him, and he definitely was working with whatever materials he'd get his hands on at the early phases of his career. When he got out, he just, he really loved painting when he was in prison. And when he got out, he just hit the streets and said, to himself, I'd rather be painting than hanging out on the corner. And that's what he did. And when you look at these pieces, I mean, they're really powerful. the hood. This is one strong piece. You know, and the cross lynching, you know, the content of these pieces is very strong. It's very, you know, out of his experience. It's stuff that he's seen and lived with. You know, a lot of these folks, these are self-taught, but you know, and they fall into this category of outsider art. But that's an uncomfortable category for a lot of this, because they're really people who have developed a vision. Didn't mean to go that far. Okay, looking in, looking out. You know, this is a large scale piece. It's 48 by 87. And, you know, it's like inside and outside the prison. You know, refugees, prison bars, and eye of the system. You know, this is painted on a metal shelf, 36 by 24. The firemen who used to go out and paint the fire plugs and things like that would give the leftover paint to Purvis to paint with. You know, back in the 70s. But he was, again, one who was supported and promoted by Arnett. And this is a piece of him in the 70s on the street. You know, since then he is in collections throughout the country. Again, Metropolitan Museum, Museum of Modern Art. I believe the Whitney has some of his work. He did mural projects in some of the train stations down in Florida. And this is on the left, you see him painting. Okay. So the Van Eyck to Mondrian show is on till January 23rd. And another tradition, drawings by Black artists from the American South, is on through the 16th. This piece on the right is another Thornton dial. These pieces are monumental scale. Some of his work is like, you know, 8 feet by 12 feet. They're gigantic pieces. And, you know, he worked as a, did he work? He worked on train cars, on assembling train cars until the place where he worked closed, the factory, in 1981, and then he devoted himself completely to his art. Thank goodness. Well, that's it for this one. The next one that we're going to be doing is on the from the New York Historical Society. It's images of New York City, and it's quite a large show. It's 180 pieces in the show, so it's a who's who of whoever painted in New York, and then some. So,
okay, there are no questions, which is surprising.
All right.
So again, Larry, thank you, and thank you all, and have a safe weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.